Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj. Narae takbir, narae risalat, ya Rasulullah, narae hadari, Hussainiyat, Hussainiyat, Yazidiyat, Yazidiyat. لبيك يا حسين لبيك يا حسين لبيك يا حسين محمد وأهل بيت محمد صلوات. In the name of Almighty Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, Allah shower His mercy on Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his progeny. Now I would like to invite Brother Ali Zadeh for the recitation of Holy Quran by Muhammad wa Ahl Bayt Muhammad sallallahu.
Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and Eid Mubarak, Eidain Mubarak and Eidain. Okay, tonight inshallah we will start our program by recitation of a few ayah of Quran Azim Sha'an, which is Surah Al-Balad. And I request all brothers and sisters, could you please say loud salawat? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا أيحسب أن لم يره أحد ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين فلاقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة أولئك أصحاب الميمنة والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة عليهم نار مؤصدة صدق الله العلي العظيم. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
MashaAllah, brother Alizade. MashaAllah, Baradigar Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil. We are here to commemorate this and celebrate the birth anniversary of our third Imam, Hussain a.s. and 900 women of Karbala, Syeda Zainb s.a. Third Shaban is the happiest day in the history of Islam when Imam Hussain a.s. born in the city of Medina in the house of Sayyida Zahra. He was the son of the commander of faithful Ali ibn Abi Talib a.s. and Lady of Paradise Sayyida Fatima bint Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam. Prophet loved Imam Hussain alayhi salam too much. He said a lot of hadiths in favor of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Some of hadiths, Al-Hasan wal-Hussain Syeda Shabab Ahli Jannah. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain both are the master of Jannah. And another hadith, Al-Hussain minni wa ana min al-Hussain. I am from Hussain and Hussain is from me. We also celebrating the birth anniversary of Syeda Zainb s.a. She was the sister of Imam Hussain a.s. She was born on 1st Shaban al-Muazzam. She was the daughter of Commander of Faithful and Imam Ali a.s. and Lady of Paradise Sayyida Fatima Zahra. Prophet named her Zainab, means she was the zenith of his father. She was accompanied by Imam Hussain a.s. throughout the traveling of Karbala from Medina to Kufa and Kufa to Sham. She struggled a lot for the mission of Imam Hussain a.s. and she showed Imam Hussain a.s. his sacrifice is for the sake of Islam, and for his mission she struggled a lot. Inshallah, Maulana will recite more about Imam Hussain a.s. and Syeda Zainb sallallahu alayha wa Muhammad wa Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
जैसा कि शुबान की आज 3 है और इमाम हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम की विलादत है, तो शुबान के हवाले से चंद इशार। इसी में आलम इमकान के सुल्तान उतरे हैं, इसी में आलम इमकान के सुल्तान उतरे हैं, अबू तालिब के आंगन में सभी ज़ीशान उतरे हैं। मैं शुबान मुअज़्ज़म का तारफ़ और क्या लिखूं, मैं शुबान मुअज़्ज़म का तारफ़ और क्या लिखूं, महीना एक है लेकिन कई कुरान उतरे हैं। बर मोहम्मद व अहले बैत मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम। Now I would like to invite Brother Haider Abbas to recite Salam wa Hazur Imam Hussain alayhi salam to Antar Salawat.
خوشنود یہ بیوی زینب السلام علیہ اور امام حسین علیہ السلام پر اکثر صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل.
بڑے دیگر صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل.
میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے. میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے. حیدر کی اس میں جان ہے یہ خون بطول ہے. میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے. آل نبی کا پیار ہے ایمان کی زندگی. آل نبی کا پیار ہے ایمان کی زندگی. ان سے نہیں ہے پیار تو سب کچھ فضول ہے. میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے. خوشیاں سبھی نثار ہیں اس پر جان کی. خوشیاں سبھی نثار ہیں اس پر جان کی. جس کو غم حسین میں رونا قبول ہے. میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے. تو ان کے درد مانگ لے جو کچھ بھی بھیک دے. تو ان کے درد مانگ لے جو کچھ بھی بھیک دے. مالک سبھی جہان کی حال رسول ہے. میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے. گزرا جہاں جہاں سے نواسا رسول کا. گزرا جہاں جہاں سے نواسا رسول کا. اب تک وہاں خدا کے کرم کا نزول ہے.
حسینیت زندہ باد. حسینیت زندہ باد. یزیدیت مردہ باد. یزیدیت مردہ باد. صلوات. اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد.
ایسی عظیم ذات ہے مولا حسین کی.
کیا بات کیا بات.
ایسی عظیم ذات ہے مولا حسین کی. جس کے لیے رسول کے سجدوں میں طول ہے. میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے. دنیا میں اور کون ہے شبیر کے سوا. دنیا دنیا میں اور کون ہے شبیر کے سوا، ایسا سوار جس کی سواری رسول ہے۔ میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے، جس کے لیے یزید نے جس کے لیے یزید نے اتنے ستم کیے، جس کے لیے یزید نے اتنے ستم کیے، وہ تاج تو حسین کے قدموں کی دھول ہے۔ میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے، میرا حسین صدق و وفا کی مثال ہے، میرا حسین صدق و وفا کی مثال ہے۔ قرآن اس کتاب کا شان نزول ہے، میرا حسین باغ نبوت کا پھول ہے۔ حق محمد و محمد وانت صلی
ماشاءاللہ ماشاءاللہ برادر، بار دیگر صلوات۔ مولا حسین کی شان میں چند اشعار۔ دل و نگاہ نبی کا سرور ہے شبیر، ہر ایک جبر کی ساعت سے دور ہے شبیر، شعار دین خدا کا شعور ہے شبیر، انا یہ کہتی ہے میرا غرور ہے شبیر، زبان سے اس کی ہی قرآن کلام کرتا ہے، اسے تو سجدہ بھی جھک کر سلام کرتا ہے۔ پر محمد و اہل بیت محمد صلوات صلی اللہ Now I would like to invite Brother On to recite Salam by Huzur Imam Hussain a.s. Walantar Salawat.
Praise Imam Hussain a.s. Walantar Salawat. Praise Syeda Zainb s.a. Walantar Salawat. مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے، مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے، قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے، مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے، قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے، آ گئے ہیں زمین پر سبھی انبیاء، نور دنیا میں ہے آج پہلا ہوا، جو ہے اسلام کی زیب و زین آ گئے، مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے، مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے، قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے، ان کو جبریل سے جب خبر یہ ملی، خود رسول خدا نے مبارک آپ کے نور عینا گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے ہاں تا ہوں گے راہب کو بھی اب پسر آج فطر اس کو مل جائیں گے بالوں پر جاگی قسمت شہ مشرقین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے کربلا کی زمین مسکرانے لگی آج سارے حسینی منائیں خوشی ہر یزیدی کے ہونٹوں پہ بین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے دین کو دین بچائے گا جو برسرے کربلا دیکھنے اس کو جھولے میں سوتا ہوا پاتا ہے جنگ بدر و حنین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے اس قدر خوش ہے شیر خدا سے خدا سب سے انمول تحفہ عطا کر دیا جو علی کو خدا کی ہے دینا گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے مومنوں کو مبارک حسین آ گئے قلب زہرا حیدر کے چین آ گئے نعرہ حیدری
ماشاءاللہ پر دیگر صلوات صلی جیسے کہ آج سیدہ زینب سلام اللہ علیہ کی ولادت بھی ہم منا رہے ہیں تو سلسلے میں چند اشعار اسی کے دم سے سر شام اجالا ہے اسی کے عزم نے اسلام کو سنبھالا ہے ہر اعتبار سے جو معتبر حوالہ ہے اسی نے گود میں اس کربلا کو پالا ہے علی کے لہجے میں جب یہ کلام کرتی ہے تو اس کو نہج البلاغہ بھی سلام کرتی ہے نشان کفر ابھرنے نہیں دیا اس نے خدا کا دین بکھرنے نہیں دیا اس نے لہو کا رنگ اترنے نہیں دیا اس نے کسی شہید کو مرنے نہیں دیا اس نے خدا کے دین کی سب زیب و زین لگنے لگی یہ کربلا سے نکلی تو حسین لگنے لگی ور محمد و اہل بیت محمد صلوات I would like to invite Brother Bhimji Mustafa to recite Salam for Muhammad wa Ahl Bayt Muhammad Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad Salawat.
برائے خوشنودی امام زمان پر انتہا سلامات. سلام سے پہلے نعت کے چند اشعار پیش خدمت کروں گا. اور محمد علی محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. میرے خیال کو نسبت ہوئی مدینے سے, میرے خیال کو نسبت ہوئی مدینے سے, مہک گلاب کی آنے لگی پسینے سے, میرے خیال کو نسبت ہوئی مدینے سے. سنا ہے آتش دوزخ میں ڈوب جاتا ہے, سنا ہے آتش دوزخ میں ڈوب جاتا ہے, اتار دے جسے آدھے نبی سفینے سے, میرے خیال کو نسبت ہوئی مدینے سے. اور نبی کے در سے ہی خیرات زہد ملتی ہے, یہ رزق ملتا ہے سرکار کے خزینے سے, میرے خیال کو نسبت ہوئی مدینے سے. اور غلام آل محمد رئیس ہے محسن, غلام آل محمد رئیس ہے محسن, سوال ہی نہیں کرتے کسی کمینے سے, سوال ہی نہیں کرتے کسی کمینے سے, میرے خیال کو نسبت ہوئی مدینے سے. پر محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. حسین میرا ہے زیز جس کی باندھی ہے, وہ حسین میرا ہے, موت جس پہ مرتی ہے, وہ حسین میرا ہے, کبریاء بھی اس کا ہے, انبیاء بھی اس کے ہیں, اوصیاء بھی اس کے ہیں, اولیاء بھی اس کے ہیں, خلق ساری جس کی ہے, وہ حسین میرا ہے. ایسا کس کا نانا ہے, ایسی کس کی نانی ہے, ایک کا صدقہ کون مکان, ایک عرب کی ملکہ ہے, جو وقار ہستی ہے, وہ حسین میں
در پہ آئے ملک اپنی جھولیاں پھیلائے، جس کے در سے فطرس بھی آ کے بالوں پر لے جائے، رضواں جس کا درزی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے۔ حسینیت حسینیت زندہ جس کی باندھی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے، جس کے دست قدرت میں باغ ہے نبوت کی، دین کا تو کہنا کیا جب کہ خود مشیت بھی کلمہ جس کا پڑھتی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے، جو وقار ہستی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے، جس کے واسطے ناکا بن گئے ہوں خود سرور، طول دے دے سجدے کو حکم رب سے پیغمبر، جو خدا کی مرضی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے، فکر امت جد کی جس کو تھی تہے خنجر کی تلاوت قرآن جس نے نو کے نیزہ پر، دین جس سے باقی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے، کچھ نہیں یہاں تفریق رنگ و نسل و مذہب کی، ایک سب کا مسلک ہے ایک قومیت سب کی، بزم یہ حسینی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے، زیس جس کی باندھی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے، موت جس پہ مرتی ہے وہ حسین میرا ہے، بر محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ
بر محمد و اہل بیت محمد صلوات صلی علی محمد و آل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Now I would like to invite Brother Minhal to recite Salam by Huzur Imam Hussain a.s. Untitled Salawat.
بر محمد و آل محمد بلندتر صلوات. کر کے یہ اعلان مسجد سے نمازی چل دیے، جشن جنت میں کریں گے 30 شعبان کا. The translation for this verse is after announcing from the masjid, the worshippers left, and they will now be doing the milad for the 3rd of Shaban in Jannah, and this is in regards to all of the shuhada that lost their lives this past Friday in Peshawar, for which I would like to request the Surah Fatiha. بر محمد و آل محمد صلی اللہ اے دلبر زہرا شام و سحر ہم ذکر تمہارا کرتے ہیں اے دلبر زہرا شام و سحر ہم ذکر تمہارا کرتے ہیں اے دلبر زہرا شام و سحر ہم ذکر تمہارا کرتے ہیں اس طرح سے دنیا میں رہ کر عقبہ بھی سنوارا کرتے ہیں فطر اس کی طرح راہب کی طرح فرزند پیمبر کے صدقے فطر اس کی طرح راہب کی طرح فرزند پیمبر کے صدقے ہو اذن رہائی بھی اپنی تقدیر سنوارا کرتے ہیں وہ مبتلا ہو ہی نہیں سکتے دنیا کی پریشانی میں کبھی وہ مبتلا ہو ہی نہیں سکتے دنیا کی پریشانی میں کبھی جو آل محمد کا صدقہ دن رات اتارا کرتے ہیں اے دلبر زہرا شام و سحر ہم ذکر تمہارا کرتے ہیں شبیر کی رفعت کو دیکھو تقدیر یزیدی کو سمجھو شبیر کی رفعت کو دیکھو تقدیر یزیدی کو سمجھو یوں ہار کے جیتا جاتا ہے یوں جیت کے ہارا کرتے او عالم غربت کی ٹھوکر یا تشنہ دہانی اور خنجر او عالم غربت کی ٹھوکر یا تشنہ دہانی اور خنجر اسلام پہ مر مٹنے والے ہر رنج گوارا کرتے ہیں حسنین و علی کی الفت میں دنیا سے گئے وہ لوگ وہی इस शेर पे खास तवज्जो चाहूँगा। हसनैन व अली की उल्फत में दुनिया से गए जो लोग वही हसनैन व अली की उल्फत में दुनिया से गए जो लोग वही कौसर के किनारे बैठे हैं जन्नत का नजारा करते हैं कौसर के किनारे बैठे हैं जन्नत का नजारा करते हैं ऐ दिलबर ज़हरा शामो सहर हम जिक्र तुम्हारा करते हैं बर मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
माशाअल्लाह मिन्हाज माशाअल्लाह बार दीगर सलावत Now I would like to invite Brother Nadir Shah to recite Salam by Hazur Imam Hussain a.s. wa Untitled Salawat.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين والحمد لله جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية علي بن أبي طالب عليه الصلاة والسلام وأولاده المعصومون الطيبون الطاهرون صلوات على محمد وآل محمد شهر شعبان المعظم شهر رسول الله ماه رسول خدا را اولا به پیشگاه مقدس امام الزمان عجل الله تعالی فرجه الشریف و امت الاسلام جميعا و شیعیان و محبین اهل بیت علیهم السلام جميعا و انتم ایها المؤمنون والمؤمنات في حضور في هذا المجلس اونهایی که در این مجلس شریف شرفیاب شده است تبریک مبارکباد عرض میکنم انشاءالله خداوند تبارک و تعالی برای همه مسلمین و خصوصا جهانیان چی مسلمان باشد و چی یهودی و چی مسیحی عیدی عنایت بفرماید که امام قائم آل محمد علیه السلام امام منتظر را انشاءالله ظهورش هرچی زودتر برای ما میسر بفرماید و برکت صلوات علی محمد و آل محمد قال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم قوله الحق أصدق من الصادقين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما أئمة 12 ثاني قلادة الدرر ثم الحسن والحسين أول سادة علي بعد النبي خير البشر المجتبى سبط الحسن ثاني قلادة درر ثم الحسين الثالث ثم الحسين الثالث شهيد كربلاء الأغر. الرابع سجادهم إمام كل من نذر. الرابع سجادهم إمام كل من نذر. الخامس محمد باقر علم من خبر. والجعفر إمامنا السادس من له الزفر. والجعفر إمامنا السادس من له الزفر. السابع ابن جعفر كاظمه بما صبر. الثامن در رضا هو الإمام المعتبر. الثامن در الرضا هو الإمام المعتبر. التاسع جوادهم كريم سادات مضر. العاشر هاديهم بسرمن راي يسر. الحسن العسكري إمامنا هادي عشر. الحسن العسكري إمامنا هادي العشر. وخاتم 12 هو الإمام المنتظر محمد وآل محمد. يا رب يسير أمره واجعلنا ممن قد زفر ظهوره ونوره وفاز من له النصر. ظهوره ونوره وفاز من له النصر. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والناصر. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والناصر. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والناصر. جبرائيل بأمر قادر لم يزلي. جبرائيل بأمر قادر لم يزلي. بر لوح فلک نوشت با خط جلی. شد باز در رحمت خدای ازلی در روز ولادت حسین ابن علی. امیر لشکر عشق است عباس. امیر لشکر عشق است عباس. یم پهناور عشق است عباس. سپهر جود را خورشید آید. سپهر جود را خورشید آید. جهان را مایه امید آید. با قامت عصمت و حیا می آید. با قامت عصمت و حیا می آید. با بانگ مناجات و دعا می آید. میلاد عبادت است یعنی سجاد. میلاد عبادت است یعنی سجاد از سوی خدا به سوی ما می آید. ای ولی الله الاعظم مولانا صاحب الزمان. ای منجی عالم مولا صاحب الزمان. گل نرگس نیست، همدم و مونیس. خوش آمدی، خوش آمدی. حجت الله، ولی الله، بقیت الله، خوش آمدی. یا ولی الله، خوش آمدی. ز قدوم مبارکت همه جا گشته گلستان، یا صاحب الزمان. شده گلبانگ کائنات ذکر، یا صاحب الزمان. ای ولی الله الاعظم، ای ولی الله الاعظم، مولا صاحب الزمان. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والنصر، اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والنصر على الأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات وجميع المرحومين في كل عالم والشهداء والصديقين، خصوصا على أرواح الشهداء المظلوم در پیشاور پاکستان. الفاتحه مع الصلوات. بسم الله.
MashaAllah, brother Nader. पर मोहम्मद व अहले बैत मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम. So tomorrow we have a milad of Hazrat Abbas a.s. and Imam Zain a.s. and milad will start after Salatul Maghribin. I will request everyone please be present here on time. So now I would like to invite Allama al-Shaykh Saleem Bhimji to recite Milad of Imam Hussain a.s. and Syeda Zainb s.a. Narae Takbir, Narae Risalat, Narae Haidari, Hussainiyat, Hussainiyat, Yazidiyat, Yazidiyat, by Muhammad wa Ahle Bayt Muhammad salawat.
One more salawat upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين، لا سيما مولانا وسيدي صاحب العصر والزمان، روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، وعجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف، ولعنة دائمة على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. For the hastening of the return of our 12th Imam, Imam Hujjah, one salawat upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. This evening we've gathered the mu'mineen and mu'minat to celebrate these major celebrations in the month of Sha'ban. Tonight, as we know, we're marking not only the birth of according to one of the riwayat of Syeda Zainb s.a, the first granddaughter of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. We're also marking the birth of the second grandson of Rasulullah, the one who we know as Sayyid al-Shuhada, the leader of the martyrs. The one whom the Prophet would call about him and his brother, that Al-Hassan and Hussain, Sayyid Shabab al-Jannah, that these two grandchildren of the Prophet, Al-Hassan and Hussain, are the leaders of the youth of paradise.
The Prophet said this when Imam Hussain and Hussain were 8 years old. But yet he was foretelling to the Ummah that these young children, they will be the leaders of all of the youth of paradise. Obviously the Prophet had seen something by Allah to give the two grandsons this unique title and this unique status. Tonight, brothers and sisters, as we've gathered together to mark this great celebration, really one of the greatest celebrations we have, because we have two immaculate, perfect role models. For our sisters, if they want to emulate, they have Syeda Zainb s.a. For the men, for the brothers, we have Abu Abdullah a.s. And they're interchangeable because our sisters can take from Imam Hussain, just as we can take from Syeda Zainb s.a. You know, tonight we've gathered in this beautiful building in Saskatoon. It's cold outside, but it's warm in here, because we're celebrating a man whom the Prophet would say that Inna liqatl al-Hussain hararatun fi qulub al-mu'minin la taqrudu abadan. A man who the Prophet would say that in the hearts of the believers there is a burning passion, a fire that is kindled, that will never subside. And you can feel it tonight, that the love we have for Ahlul Bayt, the love that each and every one of you and our sisters have for Abu Abdullah, that fire, that spark of energy keeps this center warm. You know, but at the same time that we are here tonight celebrating the birth of Abu Abdullah, we are in a gathering where we're going to speak about Abu Abdullah, where we're going to relate hadith about Abu Abdullah. There are about 60 people who are not on this earth tonight because of some cowards who walked into the masjid in Peshawar on Jummah, on the sacred day of the week, Friday, in a sacred space, a masjid, a house of Allah, in the sacred month of Sha'ban, and this coward could not confront the Shias face to face, because he knows we are the followers of Ali, Haydar al-Qarrar, the one who would incessantly attack, and he would never run away from the battlefield. They know that we are the followers of Abu Abdullah, that he would never stand away from a war. And so what they do is, as we saw in Peshawar, as we've seen, not only then, but so many times before in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in many other parts of the world, as they attack us as cowards when we're praying to Allah. But just as tonight, brothers and sisters, we are remembering Abu Abdullah in this celebratory fashion, recognize the fact that there are at least 60 men today who are celebrating the birth of Abu Abdullah, sitting next to Abu Abdullah in Jannah. They are shuhada. Allah tells us, لا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أموات. Don't think that those who have been killed in the way of Allah, that they're dead. No, they are alive in the presence of Allah, receiving rizq, sustenance. And who are they probably in the company with tonight? With Abu Abdullah, with his father Amir al-Mu'mineen, with Amir al-Mu'mineen's beloved wife Lady Zahra alayhi, with their son Imam Hussain, all the way till the 11th Shaheed, the 11th Imam. These shuhada of Pakistan tonight are sitting in a majlis, in a jashan, with the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. We still cry for them because that is our wazifa, our responsibility as mu'mineen is to cry for the shuhada. But they're celebrating tonight. They're in a happy, joyous mood. And as the Quran says, they're telling you and I, don't worry about it. We're okay. La khawfun alaykum wa la hum yahzanun. There's no worries. We're okay. We're doing good. And how can they not be doing good, being given rizq by Allah? Sitting next to Abu Abdullah in a majlis to celebrate his birth. We ask Allah to accept this majlis from us tonight, to grant the thawab to the shuhada of Peshawar and to all of the shuhada of Pakistan, of Iraq, of the entire ummah of the followers of Ahlul Bayt. We ask Allah, as we begin this majlis tonight, to give the Shias of Ali Muhammad the ability to stand up and to fight and to defend themselves. And we ask Allah to hasten the return of our 12th Imam, Imam al-Hujjah, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu al-Sharif, and so that under his banner, the Shias of Ali Muhammad that we can celebrate, we can pray our namaz, we can have our julus in Muharram, and not have to worry about another attack on our beloved. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Tonight, as I said, we mark two important individuals, Syeda Zainb s.a. and her brother Abu Abdullah. You know, to talk about Karbala, obviously, and I'm not going to look at Karbala because obviously I want to look at it from a different aspect tonight. But to know Abu Abdullah, to know Syeda Zainb s.a, we always go back to the event and the tragedy of Karbala. But as I mentioned when we commemorated her own death anniversary a few weeks ago here, we recognize that Syeda Zainab had a very unique life before the event of Karbala. As I said, that because she was a woman first and foremost, because she was a member of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, secondly, that we don't know much about her. And whatever books are out there in whatever language, they basically are rehashing the same realities that we have. You and I could not, or our ulama, could not sit down and write an encyclopedia about Syeda Zainab alayhi salam because she was a woman who was of a unique status. When other women at the time of the early days of Islam were waging wars against the Imam of the time, she was taking a role as a leader, as an educator of women, but in the house. And that's not to disrespect women that they should stay in the house. No, but she had a unique role. She was showing our women today that if you don't need to be out mixing and mingling with men, then you stay in your home. You bring up your children as righteous Muslim boys and girls. You put them on the path of Ali Muhammad. You let them do the work outside. And you as the women, as the mother, have that role of bringing up the future soldiers of the Imam of the time. And in that time though, brothers and sisters, that Syeda Zainab had, where she was behind doors, where she didn't show her face in public, as I talked about a few weeks ago, we recognize that she was a woman who was articulate, she could speak, as you and I have read her sermon in Kufa and Sham, where people were amazed at who is this woman speaking. And they would say that we hear the voice of Ali, we hear the style of Ali, we hear the bayan of Ali, but this is not Ali speaking, alayhi salam. And they would recognize that this is the daughter of the man who had the perfect command of the Arabic language, that she could stand in front of a tyrant in Kufa or Sham and speak a word to power and not be afraid of the repercussions. She was a woman who, as we know, in the history of Islam would be in Kufa. And Amir al-Mu'mineen had such confidence in her knowledge that she would give dars of tafsir of the Quran in Kufa, whereas there was a ma'soom imam present in that city. That should speak volumes of her status. That if there's an infallible, usually a non-infallible would remain silent. Look at the time of Imam Hussain and Hussain a.s. Both imams, both infallible, but one is the leader, one is the follower. And anytime Imam Hassan spoke, Imam Hussain would stay quiet. He would never speak in the presence of his brother. In fact, not only would he not speak, but hadith tell us that but when a beggar came to ask for assistance, and he would go to Imam Hussain, he would be told, go first to the brother, Imam Hassan. Go to Muhammad al-Hanafiya. If Muhammad al-Hanafiya gives you X amount of dirhams, Imam Hussain would give him a bit more because he is a higher status. But then he'll go to Imam Hassan, and he'll get even more because he is a higher status than Imam Hussain a.s. So even in charity, Imam Hussain ensured he never outstripped his brother. He never did more than his brother. He was always a step below, although they're both equal in terms of piety and iman and knowledge and imamat and isma. But one was higher than the other. But when Imam Ali alayhi salam gives Syeda Zainab the opportunity to give lectures in Kufa to women, this shows you and I and the entire ummah of Islam that she is not a normal woman. In fact, if you look at the Quran, not in the Quran directly, you look at one aspect of the Quran, you look at when the prophets would have children, in most of the cases, they would name their own children. You don't have an example, for example, that Maryam gets revelation that call your son Isa, the son of Maryam. But when it comes to the children of Ali and Fatima alayhim salam, Hassan, Hussain, Zainab, at least, if not Kulthum, at least the first three, they are not named by the mother or the father. They're not even named by the prophet. Actually, they are named by Allah directly. Maryam is called Maryam. But Zainab is called Zainab because Allah told the prophets that she is the beauty of her father, and so you tell Amir al-Mu'mineen that her name is chosen in the heavens, and you call her Zainab, the Zain of her Ab, the zenith of her father. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And this relationship was not only a brother and sister between Zainab and Abu Abdullah. Yes, at one level they were blood, obviously siblings, so they had that love and affinity and bond to one another. Nobody can doubt that. But at another level, she is the one who is following her Imam. Her Imam, when Imam Hussain is killed, alayhi salam, her brother becomes her Imam, her leader. And in that relationship, there's a lot of unique things. I'm just going to maybe mention one or two. The unique relationship between Syeda Zainab and Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, not just a brother and sister affectionate relationship, not just a very superficial bond because of coming from the same mother and father, but no, Zainab alayhi salam becomes, as we hear, Sharikatul Hussain. She becomes the partner of Imam Hussain in his mission, in his message, in his legacy. She follows him all the way through it. She could have probably stayed in Medina if she wanted to. It was not wajib for women to travel, especially to an area where there is a conflict, right, to a conflict zone. But yet she makes that decision with the permission of her husband, obviously. And not only does she accompany Abu Abdullah until Karbala, till his Shahada, but the beauty is that Imam Hussain and Bibi Zainab alayhim salam, they had a continuous communication in Karbala. You've all heard this on the Shab of Ashur, them talking to one another on the day of Ashura. Imam Hussain is going to her tent, she's coming to his tent, with Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam is there. One of the most poignant and passionate and emotional moments perhaps on that day of Ashura is when Abu Abdullah knows that he's about to make his farewell journey. He won't come back after this last trip to the desert. And the one thing, or at least the one thing that we know, because I'm sure there's a lot of conversations that nobody knows about. We only know what we know because there were narrators or relators of history there. And some things Bibi Zainab told us, some things Imam Sajjad told us. So there were a lot of conversations we don't know that happened between brother and sister. But the one beauty, or the one beautiful thing rather, that Imam Hussain alayhi salam asks of his sister, Bibi Zainab, he says, "Oh my dear sister, don't forget me in your nafila of layl. In your namaz al-sham, don't forget me." Imagine at a critical time in your life and you're asking your sister, don't forget me in your prayers. Not your wajib prayers, but your night prayers. Mustahab, not wajib for her. And the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam tell us an entire journey. That night of the Sham Ghariba, till they went to Kufa, to Sham, they say that she was always, whenever the time for the namaz al-sham came, she would pray it. Standing if she could, sitting when she couldn't stand. And as we know, she didn't just remember Imam Hussain in a ceremonial fashion, just in namaz or du'as. No, she carried that message, brothers and sisters. She carried that message throughout the ummah of Islam at that time. The fact that we don't know for 100% certainty where she is buried, maybe it's Medina, maybe it's Sinjar in northern Iraq, maybe it's in Egypt, maybe it's in Sham, with all possibilities heading towards Sham and Damascus. But the fact that there's ambiguity shows us that she was so powerful in conveying the message of her brother that the forces and the powers that be couldn't stand her voice. They couldn't stand for her to be in Medina to awaken the masses. So she not only remembered Abu Abdullah in her namaz, she remembered him every stage of the journey, to the point where she ends up losing her life in the service of Islam and in the service of her brother, Imam Hussain a.s. With that, let me segue into the second walada that we're marking tonight, which is of the brother of Syeda Zainab, the grandson of Rasulullah, one of the two youths of paradise, the one whom the Prophet called not only a leader of the youth of paradise, but he said that he is Safinatun Najah, the ark of salvation, and the torch of guidance, the lamp of guidance. You know, there's a very interesting way that Rasulullah describes about Abdullah. It's a hadith that I found in the book Kamil al-Ziyarat. It's a hadith that maybe some of you may have heard, maybe you haven't heard of it. As you and I know, there are hundreds of hadith that Shias and the Sunnis narrate to speak of the fadilat of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain a.s, and especially Imam Hussain. But there's a way that the Prophet described Imam Hussain a.s. in this hadith where he says, and I'll just read the English of it. He says, "My son," meaning Imam Hussain a.s, "will be buried in a land called Karbala." And, you know, incidentally, even the Sunnis, they have hadith in their books like Sahih Bukhari, that the Prophet told his wife Salama, al-Mu'mineen, that my son Hussein will be killed in Karbala. And we've heard this story where the Prophet gave her some dirt from Karbala, and he told her, when this dirt turns to blood, know that Hussein has been killed in Karbala. So the Prophet in this hadith says that my son will be buried in a land called Karbala. And then he says something interesting. He says that in that land, there will be a dome constructed. Like in this center, you have this dome above our heads. The Prophet says that hiya buq'atul lati kanat fiha buq'atul Islam. That there will be a dome, or where he will die and be buried will be a dome, which will be known as the Dome of Islam. Buq'atul Islam. And then he says that this is the same place where Allah saved the believers who accepted Prophet Noah alayhi salam and boarded the ark of Prophet Noah. So when we talk about Imam Hussain alayhi salam being Safinatun Najat, it's not an exaggeration that just if you know the story of Prophet Noah, how the people, or first of all the animals boarded the ark, they accepted him as the prophet. Some of the people joined Prophet Noah. As we know, many rejected him. The same with Abu Abdullah. There were animals on the day of Ashura who would have accepted him as the Imam. But there were people who were worse than the animals who rejected Abu Abdullah. But the fact that the Prophet says that this land where he'll be buried and his grave will be known as the Dome of Islam. You know, I read this hadith even a few years ago, and I was thinking, why would the Prophet call Abu Abdullah the Dome of Islam? What is the significance of a dome? Right? And even if you think about it, did they even have domes at the time of the Prophet? We know when they built the Masjid of the Prophet, it was a flat roof. They didn't have the ability to construct a dome like we have today, like we have here, or in any of the harams. You go to Abu Abdullah's haram in Karbala, or in Najaf to Amir al-Mu'mineen, there's a beautiful golden dome. But what is the significance of a dome? You know, this is where we see, brothers and sisters, that in Islam, there is a lot of significance that is given to physical items, immaterial items. You know, we have, for example, in this room beside me, the alams of the Ahlul Bayt. All they are is a piece of wood, a stick with some fabric around it, with some writing in Arabic. But when you write on that cloth and you attribute that to Karbala, that wood, which could be bought from Home Depot for $4, now takes on a significance than any other piece of wood. You all have wood at home, but you don't go and kiss the wood that makes up the frame of your house. But you go and kiss that because it's now attributed to Karbala. This minbar I'm sitting on right now, made out of wood. You go and you buy the wood for a few hundred or a few $1,000s and you make a mimbar. But before you make the mimbar, it has no significance. It's just wood you bought from the store, the hardware store. And even there are times where mimbars like this are built and they're worthless. You look at the sermon, I'm sorry to go distract from my topic, but you look at the sermon that Imam Zain a.s. gives in the court of the cursed Yazid, Mal'oon, La'natullah alayh. And when Yazid is done speaking what he wanted to say, which was probably garbage as it was, there was a mimbar there. But because the mimbar had not been used for good purposes, because the man who sat on that mimbar, the cursed Yazid, was an evil man, when the fourth Imam told Yazid, give me the permission to speak, he didn't say, allow me to go upon the mimbar of Rasul and give a majlis or a lecture. He says, allow me to stand upon these pieces of worthless wood. He didn't use that word in English, he called it a'wad. Use a word in Arabic to mean just pieces of wood that are found here and there. He says, allow me to stand on those pieces of wood and deliver a lecture. So the mimbar can be used for holiness and for corruption. Who sits on the mimbar determines where that value of that thing belongs. So this dome, and even the shape of a building, for example, this center is square in shape, and there's a dome. And there's all symbolism in all of this, brothers and sisters. Everything in this building, the architecture, the calligraphy, everything is done for a reason. It's not just haphazardly because the calligrapher thought this would look nice and it would look artsy. No, he had a niyat, an intention why he put everything here. So the dome and a square structure, if you study architecture, they tell us that buildings that are square in shape, they're meant to symbolize the earth. The terrestrial plane that we live on. And then the dome, they tell us, which is a semicircle, it represents perfection. It represents eternity. It represents the heavens, where Allah, not where Allah resides, Allah is everywhere, but we tend to think of Allah as being in the heavens. So we raise our hands to dua to the sky. And so I think, in my understanding, my humble understanding, when Rasulullah says that the place where Hussain will be buried, this land of Karbala, is Qubbatul Islam, is the dome of Islam. What the Prophet is saying is that area and that man who's buried under that dome is the symbol of perfection. He's a paragon of perfection. You want to know who is the perfect human being to follow? You don't go to the companions of the Prophet. Some of them were great, no doubt. Salman, Abu Dhar, Bilal, Miqdad. These people may really sacrifice for their sake. But the man who was perfect is Abu Abdullah. If the dome symbolizes eternity, his message goes on for eternity. People may have thought 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when will the world hear about Imam Hussain? And today you have the Who is Hussain campaign, although there are some challenges that they need to sort out. But the fact that Imam Hussein's name is on the corner of a street in Saskatoon, and there's a flag that is saying Ya Hussain in Arabic, and there's a banner that says that a man stood 1400 years ago, and every day when your neighbors drive by and they walk by the center and they see the name Hussain, they're going to wonder who is Hussain. And they will Google Hussain. And they will come to know who this man is. And so his name will remain for eternity. And his name, as we know, is more celebrated in the heavens than on earth. Today you and I are here, alhamdulillah. But in Karbala, we're told that angels come down to Karbala in the thousands to greet Abu Abdullah. They do the tawaf of his grave. They go back up again and they never come back to earth again. And Allah creates another batch of angels. They come down, they greet him, they do tawaf, they go back up, they never come again. And this continues until the end of this world. Until the end of this world, subhanAllah. Allahumma salli ala. May Allah make us of those who constantly remember Imam Hussain, who do the dhikr of Abu Abdullah, and who are able to, in this region of Canada to continue to remember the name and the mission of Abu Abdullah Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. I'm going to conclude shortly. I have one more point to mention, inshallah, tonight about Abu Abdullah. I look at him, again I was thinking how to address a community who is so in love and who recognize Imam Hussain. What can a person say that has not already been said about the leader of the martyrs, the leader of the youth of paradise? And the one thing that I found in the life of Imam Hussain a.s. is that he is a man who becomes a force for change. He becomes a man whom people can look to regardless of religion, Muslim or not. And you can change your life for the positive, for the better, through the memory of Imam Hussain a.s. There are a lot of things we can learn from the University of Karbala. Unfortunately, we don't have an infrastructure. We have University of Saskatoon, University of Toronto. They might get great degrees, no doubt. But what you can learn in the University of Hussain a.s. in Muharram and in all of the majalis that commemorate him, no university can give you that degree. No piece of paper could ever be worth the farsh that we sit on for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. No matter you have PhD after PhD, the ground that we sit on is worth more than that piece of paper. The knowledge we get from the majlis of Imam Hussain alayhi salam will not make us a few dollars in the world like a PhD might, but it will give us untold riches in the akhirat. It will get us to a station, brothers and sisters, that we would never imagine that we could have. And that's all through the blessings of the shahadat of this great personality we mark tonight. But why I say he's a force of change? I say he's a force of change because when you read the hadith, the statements of the Imam, he brings forth teachings that wake us up. They shake us to the core. Just like Hur was shooken to the core, and he was willing to pray namaz al-jamaat behind Imam Hussain, even though he was going to cut Imam Hussain off and he wouldn't allow him to move forward or go back. Imam Hussain allows him and his army to pray namaz behind him. He gives Hur water. He feeds the animals that they have water. This shows us, brothers and sisters, that Imam Hussain is a force of change. If he can change a hard-hearted man like Hur, he can change anybody in this world. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. We all sin. We all go against the laws of Allah. But if Hur could change, so can we. If the people out there today who don't know Imam Hussain and they're doing whatever they do, if they were to study the life of Abu Abdullah, they would also change. But how can we affect change in our lives through the legacy of Abu Abdullah? I want to mention one hadith where he gives us 3 qualities or characteristics that we have to look for in ourselves. And this becomes the biggest challenge. How do I look at myself? Not in the mirror physically, but how do I look at myself through the lens of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam? Am I how they want me to be? They don't care if I wear a turban or I wear Arab clothing. They don't care about these outward qualities of how long the beard might be. The beard has to be there. That's obviously a given. It doesn't have to be a certain length. They don't care about that. They're looking at the qualities that we have as mu'mineen and mu'minat. So the hadith says that a man comes to Hussain alayhi salam. A man comes to Imam. They don't give the name in the hadith. There's no name of who comes to him. It just says, Ja'a rajulun. A man comes and he says to Imam Hussain, he says, Yabna Rasulillah, O son of the Messenger of God, Ana min Shiyatikum, I'm of your Shias. This is something I'm sure we all say. We go to the qabr of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam for ziyarat. We greet the Imam, we say, I'm one of your Shias. And we have obviously a long way to go to get to that level, as we will see in the hadith tonight. But the man says, Yabna Rasulillah, Ana min Shiyatikum. I'm one of your Shias, I'm one of your lovers. I follow you. The Imam doesn't pat him on the back and say, MashaAllah, Shabash, beautiful, keep it up, you're a good guy, you know, what are you doing? The Imam says to him, Ittaqillah. He says, have the taqwa of Allah, have the consciousness of Allah. And he says, وَلَا تَدَعِيَنَّ شَيْئًا. Don't make false claims in front of Allah. Now can you imagine you're standing in front of Abu Abdullah, you say, I'm your Shia. Imagine we were to go to Ziyarat and we went to the qabr, to the dhari, to the qabr of Imam Hussain, and we said, Assalamu alaikum ya Abu Abdullah, I am of your Shia. Imagine we hear a voice coming back to us saying, don't lie to me. You're not my Shia. Can you imagine what you and I would feel? And there are ulama who were told that they were so pious, they would go to the grave of Imam Rada or Imam Ali or any of the Imams and they would say salam, and they would actually hear the jawab back from the dhari. Because they're not dead, right? Ahlul Bayt, we all know the Ahlul Bayt are not dead. They're very much alive, more than you and I. So imagine you go for ziyarat and you say, Assalamu alaikum, I'm your Shia, the response comes, no, you're a liar. Now imagine how that feels to us. Imagine this man, he's literally standing in front of Abu Abdullah, in the flesh, in Medina probably, or maybe in Karbala, I don't know, the hadith won't say, but probably in Medina. And then he says, the Imam says to this man, he says, when you think that you are my Shia, Allah is going to say to you, كَذَبْتَ وَفَجَرْتَ فِي دَعْوَتِكَ. You have lied and you have been dishonest in your claims of being my Shia. So this man is probably, the hadith doesn't mention it, but I'm sure that he's shivering in his boots right there. How can Allah say that to me? I'm a liar. Right? And then the Imam gives us 3 qualities that we need, brothers and sisters. And this is for all of us. We all need to read and understand what Imam Hussain is saying. He's not going to talk about namaz. You don't pray enough namaz every day. Although when we do the ziyarat of Waratha, we say, Ashhadu annaka qad aqamta as-salat wa atayta az-zakah. I bear witness that you upheld the namaz. So we are expected to pray every day 5 times a day. But he doesn't tell the men you don't pray enough, you don't fast enough, you don't give enough khums and zakat, you don't go for hajj, you don't do this and that. He tells them 3 very interesting things. He says, Inna shiyatana man salimat qulubuhum min kulli ghishin wa ghillin wa daghlin. He says, indeed our followers, our true Shias, they are the people whose hearts are free from 3 things. Ghish, which we can translate as deception, ghil, which is hatred, and dakhal, which is craftiness. You're a very sly person. He says, وَلَكِنْ كُلْ إِنَّ مِنْ مَوَالِيكُمْ وَمُحِبِّكُمْ. Rather, don't say you're my Shia until you have these. Say that you are my follower and you love me, that you love us, the Ahlul Bayt. Now the Imam talked about 3 things, ghish, ghil, and dakhal. As I said, ghish is deception. How can a Shia be a deceptive person? You know, the scholars of akhlaq, of Islamic morality, when they define ghish, they call it, again, deception, and they give us examples. For example, you have a business, and I'm sure many of us in this room run our own businesses. You have a business and you do ghish. You are shortchanging your customer. You sell something to them and you don't give them, you take full money, but you don't give them full whatever they're purchasing, the commodity, the product. Or you work for somebody and your employer expects you to be there from this time to that time, 8, 9, 10 hour, whatever your shift is, and you cut corners, you come late, you leave early. Your lunch is 1 hour, you take an hour and a half. Coffee break is this much, you take extra. You're doing ghish. You're being deceptive. This is not the way of a Shia. And I'm not pointing at people tonight. I'm not saying that people have told me that people are doing this. This is a general discussion tonight. But these are things we have to reflect upon. It's great to pray namaz. It's great to do all the wajibat. But if we are engaged in shortchanging our customers, not giving our employers full commitment in our job, or we're in school and we have an exam and we decide we're going to cheat. Right? We have so many ways today to cheat, and we're going to cheat on the exam. This is ghish. This is a sin. This is haram. You might say, well, it's not a big deal. It's only math in grade 8. If I cheat a bit, I'm not going to hurt anybody. But imagine if your cardiologist said, I got through med school by cheating on my exams, and I'm going to try and fix your heart. But I skipped a couple of classes and I cheated on some of my exams in med school, so I might mess up and maybe, kill you. Right? You'd be concerned about it, right? Or your accountant, he doesn't know how to do taxes, and the CRA is after you for unclaimed incomes. So the point being, brothers and sisters, is that Islam is looking at it, Imam Hussain is looking at it not only from the religion as an act of worship or ibadat. He's saying that as believers, don't call yourselves a Shia if you're cheating people, you're swindling people, you're taking more than your haqq. This happens so many times. You go to the Muslim countries and you want to buy some fruit or you want to buy something, and they tell you this is fresh and this is this and that and it's ripe and it looks good, and then you buy it and it turns out to be garbage. They cheat us so many times, unfortunately. This is ghish, and as a Shia we can never claim to love Ahlul Bayt a.s on one hand and then cheat another believer, even a non-believer on the other hand. Number 2 is where the Imam says, you can't be my Shia because you have ghil in your heart. Ghil is what we would translate into English as a very raw translation, as hatred for somebody else, as a deep-seated rancor and disgust for another person. Sometimes we look at the Quran, and Allah says in the Quran, for example, Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُمْ. Allah says Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Those that are with him are ashidda, they are very strong, very determined against the kuffar, but they're very merciful amongst one another. Sometimes I see this in my journeys around the world, that unfortunately there are disagreements that happen in the community, just as sometimes a family may have fights and brothers and sisters won't talk to one another. But as the Quran says that believers are supposed to be having rahmah, ruhama, have mercy amongst one another and be firm against the disbelievers. Sometimes we are the other way. We're great with our co-workers who are non-Muslims, but we are very disrespectful to our spouse or our community members. We don't want to sit in their company. We don't want to come to a majlis if we know another person will be there that we had a disagreement with. And again, disagreements are natural, but we have to try and break that cycle of not wanting to be around one another. We can't claim to be Shias, celebrate Imam Hussein's birthday on the 3rd of Sha'ban, come in Muharram, and beat our chest for him, and we hate another believer because of a misunderstanding or even an intentional argument or a fight. Things will happen in life. We have emotions, we get upset sometimes, that's understandable. But as the Imam says, that you cannot have hatred for somebody in your heart and claim to be a Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. We always, and even I would say that, we even don't hate non-Muslims. There's no way we should hate a non-Muslim. Because if we hate them, why would we want them to be guided? And if we all should want non-Muslims to be guided to Islam, to the path of Ahlul Bayt. So we shouldn't hate them. There are times where people would be in the presence of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt a.s, and a non-Muslim would be there, and the non-Muslim would sneeze, and as a tradition we have it, you say, Yarhamakumullah, may Allah have rahmah on you. And there were times where companions would be with a non-Muslim, and he would sneeze, and they wouldn't say that to that man, that may Allah have mercy on you. And the infallible Ma'soom Imam would tell that companion, why didn't you wish him to have mercy, for Allah to have mercy on him? And the companion would say, this is a kafir. He's a non-Muslim. Why should I worry about making dua for Allah to have mercy on him? And the Imam would say something so beautiful, brothers and sisters, that this can only come from an infallible. He says that if you want that man to convert to Islam, you need to make dua that Allah gives him His mercy. If you don't want mercy on him, that means Allah won't help him, guide him to Islam. So we have to wish mercy even for non-Muslims. When we see people dying around the world, if they're not Muslims, it doesn't mean we don't make dua for them. We pray for our own, definitely, but we have to pray for non-believers as well. Because if we can pray for them, they can be saved from a war, then maybe we can give them da'wah. We can teach them about Islam. They can come to Islam and they can also carry the banner of Abu Abdullah alayhi salatu wassalam. The third and last point of the hadith is where the Imam says that his Shia will not have what he calls daghal. It's a very weird word actually in Arabic. It isn't used too often. It's not used in the Quran at all. And it basically means to try and deceive somebody. To pretend that you are somebody that you're not. To try and pretend that you are, for example, selling something that isn't what it is. Probably the best example I can give in our society are TV commercials. They advertise products. You buy this product and you'll have the whitest teeth. You buy this product, you'll have the cleanest clothing. You buy this car, you'll be driving in luxury. And this and that will happen to you. A lot of that is hyperbole. It is over-exaggeration. But at the same time, it's deceit. Right? They're literally telling us what we call a white lie. And a believer would never do this. A believer would never promote themselves. They are somebody that they're not. Right? Whoever they may be. Sometimes I see people do this. They are on social media and they'll actually go out and buy people to follow them. There are websites you can actually buy followers on Twitter and Instagram. You can pay money and there's farms that people will add subscribers to your YouTube account or whatever. And people sometimes do this to deceive the public. The Imam says a Shia of mine would never be deceitful. Not at work, not at school, not if they have a business and they're advertising. Nowhere would a Shia be deceitful. And then the Imam, as I said, I'll conclude with this, he says that, look, don't call yourself a Shia, because if you have these qualities, you are lying to yourself, you're lying to Allah. And Allah says in the Quran, "Ala la'natullahi ala al-kadhibin," the lanat of Allah is on the liars. So call yourself a follower, a mawali, a lover, a muhib, and strive to get to the level of a Shia. Right? That's what all of us in this room tonight are striving to become the true Shia, and we're getting there. But we have to get there and we have to work hard at it. It's a struggle. It's not just namaz on time, it's not just these acts of worship, it's our social interaction with one another, with our families, with our community, with our overall Muslim, non-Muslim society. How are we living with others? And when we get to that level where we are interacting in that beautiful way, just like Imam Hussain a.s. was able to tell Hur, and he came to Abu Abdullah and he converted, we can say, and he changed his ways, we would see the same in our lives. People who don't have love for Islam today would convert and come and they would become the best of believers. And they would be people that we would look to emulate. Just as today we emulate Hur, we want to be like Hur. We go to Iraq, we go to the Haram of Hazrat Hur. We make a separate special journey all the way to where he's buried to make ziyarat of Hazrat Hur alayhi salam. That we want that to be a society of mu'mineen like that, brothers and sisters. I conclude on this blessed night where we mark the birth of Bibi Zainab s.a. and her beloved brother Abu Abdullah, our third Imam. We ask Allah to accept this act of worship from us tonight. We ask Allah to give the followers and the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, those who are the true Shias of Ahlul Bayt, those who are the muhib of Ahlul Bayt, we ask Allah to give us all the ability to continue to follow in the footsteps of Imam Hussain and Bibi Zainab s.a. We ask Allah to allow us to make the ziyarah to Bibi Zainab in Damascus, to make the ziyarah to Abu Abdullah in Karbala. We ask Allah to give us the ability to have their shafaat on the Day of Judgment. We ask Allah to forgive all of our loved ones who have left this world on the path of Iman. We ask Allah to forgive all of those who have left this world. We especially ask Allah once again, as we remember the Shuhada of Pakistan, especially Peshawar, who were killed yesterday, and all of the Shuhada who have given their lives over the centuries for the preservation of this religion, especially those who have died for no other reason that they are, other than that they are the Shias of Ali. We ask Allah to accept their shahadat, to give them the company of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad a.s. And we ask Allah to allow us to become the shuhada that just as the others have given their lives, that we too can be the shuhada in the way of Abu Abdullah and in the way of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Let us conclude with the recitation of Surah Mubarakatul Fatiha for all of the marhumeen, from our community, our friends, our family, the ulama, the shuhada. Surah Mubarakatul Fatiha, but before that, your loudest salawat. Make that salawat reach to Karbala upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.